organization, and I love to talk planning, and I know that a lot of you do too. So I've brought on today Dawn Hanigan from By Sun and Candlelight, and Jen Mcintosh from Wildflowers and Marbles, and we get to talk planning today with you. So you can type in your questions in the chat box, and Courtney will make sure that we see those, and we will just get started talking about planning for the new year and setting goals and really getting a plan that works for us in the midst of the day-to-day in where life, we have to know that there are going to be interruptions and that our plans aren't going to work out exactly like we want them to. And so kind of keeping that balance where we make a plan, but we aren't so tied to it that we're devastated when it doesn't work out. Just before we started, both of us, or all three of us, were talking about how, if one of us disappears, it's because of the 2-year-old or the 3-year-old that's calling from the bathroom. So that is just the way life rolls. So Jennifer, you want to start by introducing yourself a little bit and tell us a little about your family and your blog and where people can find you?
Sure. Well, first, thanks very much for inviting me. I am excited to be and talk about one of my favorite subjects, planning. I've been writing at Wildflowers and Marbles for 7-8 years now, which is kind of hard to believe. I was kind of clicking around today, looking at old posts, and it's interesting, and it's kind of a treasure of a place where I've shared. And anyway, that's kind of where I shared some of my ideas, or I began to share some of my ideas about planning and how I organize, and it became clear that there was a lot of interest in that. And I think it's because as moms, as the heart of our home, this is our vocation, and so to sort of give that some thought, put some time into it. And I think when you think about planning at all, remember that God is a God of order, not of chaos. And so even though we each have very, very different ways of planning, what's intuitive for me is not going to be the same thing that's intuitive for Dawn or for Misty or for any of you, for example. But there is a sort of an overarching idea of planning and considering your day, your season of life, where you are. So when we talk about our plans today, and which I'm really excited to do, and some of the things we do to make lists and organize and brainstorm things from big picture working our way in, I would like for you to be excited and inspired by the ideas, but I don't want you to feel paralyzed by them or scared off by them, because this is my season of life and I have older teens that drive and can run errands for me, and you might be a mom with 5 kids under the age of 8. So, so do keep in mind that there are very, very different seasons as you work the plan and as you consider the plan. And as you plan, keep in mind that planning is for persons. We keep the people of our family in mind, not just the lists that we make, which are great, and I get very excited about lists and pens and paper and all of those things. But of course, it's fine to take a list and put it to the side and consider that your 2-year-old just climbed into your lap and is asking for a book. So that's sort of how I came to all of this, and I'm really excited to be visiting with both of you today and all of you online.
That's great. Thank you, Jen. And Dawn.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me, Misty. This is so much fun, and I'm really honored to be asked to be here with both of you. I've been blogging at By Sun and Candlelight for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in March. And I've been homeschooling for about 15 years, I think it is. And I have 4 boys. My oldest is in college. He is 20. I have a 16-year-old and a just turned 14-year-old yesterday. And I also have a 2-year-old. So I have quite a spectrum here. I love planning. Anyone who's read my blog knows that I love it. I'm always talking about it. I am very honest about the fact that I'm not always very good at it. But I think that I love what I do. I love what I get to do as a mom and as a homeschooling mom. And this is my life's work. So I'm going to put a lot of thought and attention into it. I try not to pressure myself to figure out the perfect plan because I don't think there is a perfect plan. I like making plans even if they don't come to fruition because they might be helpful someday, and if I share them on my blog, it might be helpful to someone else. And one of the things I like that Jen said was about seasons, and I think one of the things I like about seasons is it means different things. So there's seasons of our life, and I'm kind of have a foot in a lot of different seasons right now. There's seasons that are natural, that we go through the year, and there's all kinds of things to find and enjoy in the year. And there's seasons of our faith, and there's liturgical seasons, there's natural seasons. So there's a lot to tap into, and I just feel like there's just so much joy to be found. And I try to plan ahead so that, like Jen said, there's not as much chaos. There's going to be chaos because I have kids of all ages and 4 boys, and sometimes the chaos is part of the joy, but I think that I feel really good about myself when I'm trying to figure out how to best serve my family, and my role is to plan things out for us and keep trying to fit it to us in the best way I can. So I'm excited for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm so excited to talk about this. This is going to be great.
All right. Thanks, John and Dawn. Jen and Dawn. So I'm Mystie Winckler, and I have 5 kids. They're 12, 10, almost 8, almost 6, and just turned 3. So all kind of in there. I haven't been at it nearly as long, although I grew up homeschooled. I was homeschooled from kindergarten through high school, and now we're second generation doing it all over again. So
it's awesome.
It's exciting.
That is so great. Oh my gosh.
So I wanted to talk first about how we know what kind of plans to make. You know, I think sometimes when I read planning posts or see other people's plans online, sometimes it seems like they are very detailed. Like some people plan out all the details or cover all contingencies or plan out, you know, kind of every area. There are so many areas of life. Our plans could be very intricate and detailed, or they could be very pared down and minimal. So I'm curious about how you decide what goes into your plan, what areas you plan, and how much detail you put in the plan, especially when, you know, life happens and those details often don't turn out the way that we expected. So Jen, you want to start?
Sure. I feel bad you both said how many children you have, and I should mention I have 5 kids as well, and so they're kind of ranging in age from 19 down to 2, so it's 19, 15, new driver, almost 11, almost 8, and 2.5. So that's my group. And like Dawn, I've been homeschooling for 15 years. And my mom homeschooled my brother and sister before, so she's really a fantastic resource for planning and brainstorming, which sort of go hand in hand and sort of segue into the question that Mystie was asking about in terms of detail. And I honestly think that the level of detail you plan in is more a function of your personality or your temperament. If you're a really detail-oriented person, then seeing those details on paper is going to make you feel more comfortable, a little bit more relaxed. Hopefully you'll know that life can interrupt. God's plans often do and sort of make us laugh. But so that level of detail, I think, is a function of temperament. Yeah. In terms of detail, when I plan, I tend to start sort of up here, thinking big picture, and I do this seasonally, and you ladies probably do as well. Each season, both within the seasons of the church and the seasons of the year, they sort of naturally fit that time frame where you want to think about what's going on. And for those plans, I'm really thinking almost big chunks. And so my plans are phrases. They're not detailed at all. It might be clean out the garage, and that's it. So that level of planning goes in big picture planning. I know it needs to happen. I'm going to put a label on it. But as I begin working it in, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit today, how we work it in and funnel our plans, that's when some of those details come out. And if it's a job that I'm doing, if it's a plan that I've made for myself, then I may not need to spell out exactly how I want to clean out the closet or whatever. But if I'm delegating, then I'm probably spelling it out to the nth degree, because anybody with teens knows that they really could have a law degree all on their own in terms of how they validate or justify. So so the answer to when you get it down to the nitty-gritty, how detailed is it for me, it might depend on who is going to live that plan. And yeah.
That makes sense, yeah. And how about you, Dawn?
I love what Jen said about the details, because my temperament is to make as many details as I possibly can. I fill pieces of paper out to the edges, but that's just my personality. And I think that from having planned for so many years now, one of the comforts is that I think that I'm okay when things don't happen, because I know there's going to be, or I'm hoping, and God willing, there'll be another year, and there'll be another chance to do this. So making all those plans, it fuels me. It sort of lets my mind just sort of expand a little bit, and I go as far as I can, and then I know that it might not work out the way I want it to, but that's okay. And for me, I kind of see the year very much like Jen does with the seasons. I sort of plan out in big chunks, like Jen said, 6 seasons of the year, and themes, ideas, and activities. And then what I like to do, really, when I get a little more specific about planning, is I like to break the year down into weeks, and that's really what I attack at, one at a time. Is what is this week, and I tend to like to assign a theme to a week, and often that is drawing from that season. So it might be a feast day that week, or it might be something happening in nature that week, and that helps me sort of just hone in, and I try to come up with a rhythm where we're able to sort of take some of the ideas and activities that are like a bigger idea and plug them into where this week will this work, and taking into consideration how busy that week might be. But generally we have I like to have there be a little bit of a rhythm to the week, where we have some days that are quieter and some days that are busier, and just knowing that coming up with these ideas are great, and writing it down, and if it happens, that's wonderful, and if it's not, there's always next year. So it's good to get it down on paper, even if it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's something about just writing it down that helps kind of clarify it in your mind, and you can think about it better when it's written down.
I agree, definitely. It helps me keep planning more. Just keep going with it, definitely.
I think it also lends a little bit of a comfort to the season of life you're in. You might be winging along, doing really well, and being very, very productive, and God interrupts with some cross or some suffering, and having those plans sort of laid in place, if everyone's sort of used to kind of moving to that rhythm, that very natural rhythm of your plans, it feels okay. You think, okay, well, we're doing okay here. We can just push these aside. It's time to live this cross. And 2, it's easy for the children and everyone else to pick up and say, well, okay, I know Mom keeps her plans right here. Here's the menu. Here's where the menu that Mom pulls from, and those sort of things. So it's also helpful in terms of maintaining a sense of rhythm and order, which children need so much.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I also plan kind of in chunks like that. Tied with our homeschooling too, because we homeschool through the year in 6-week interval, 6-week terms. Mm-hmm. So, that makes a really natural break then if we school for 6 weeks and then take a week off. Then that week off, I have a little bit more time to, catch up on the laundry and the projects, but also take a little bit of extra time to then plan for the next chunk of 6 weeks. And
exactly.
I have an assistant here.
Hi.
She's hand motioning for me. So that was really interesting, Jen, when you brought up planning, how your plans help your kids. And one question we just got was how you guys introduce planning with your older kids, if they have personal projects, not just schoolwork, but just introducing planning to your kids, especially teens.
Yeah, yeah. I do think it's actually important to share with them, one, how you plan, but then at a certain point to begin to hand off how you're planning and what they could do in their planning, how they could manage their time. And I like to do this starting around middle school, really, and just kind of invite them to start managing their time, give them some tools to work with, begin to show them sort of a framework that they can work with, and let them begin to work in that. My older daughter is working on her own now, and she actually has a very different way of planning and approaching things, but I love that she very much sits down and considers what she's doing, what's going on, how that will affect her time, our time. And we have a big sort of meeting together, usually Sunday evening, Monday morning. Sometimes it's really informal, sometimes it's around the dinner table, where we all share, especially with the older kids, what their activities are for the coming week, what they've got going on, how they need to do various things, when they need to be involved with my plans, what I've got going on. So that turning over of time management is a little more difficult for the young man than it is for the young lady.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's a little bit more challenging. Nevertheless, they have to learn to manage their time, and so so giving them some tools, considering them as moms, we know their temperament and their personality. We know the kind of things. Obviously, my son is not going to work with a lovely floral planner, but giving him some tools that he might work with. He actually prefers a digital medium and sort of plans and maps things out in there. So you consider them, you consider their temperament, and then you know the basic framework of helping them see a problem, see an issue or a challenge, and it's sort of like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You help them envision how they can take those little bites and begin to work that out in whatever tool they're going to use.
That's great, thank you. Do you have anything to add, Dawn?
Yeah, that was great. And actually, I only have boys, so I don't have a girl to compare it to, but I have found that my boys are a little resistant to the whole planning thing like their mother is. I do try to just sort of, I'm very vocal with my kids anyway. I'm always just sharing a lot of myself because they're around me a lot, and I think that, I'm trying to model for them the behaviors the way I live. So I'm always, talking about my lists and this and that. And I was a little nervous when my son went to college because I thought, boy, I really sort of micromanaged a lot of what he did as a homeschooler. And I was hoping that he would be able to manage his time, and he's doing really well with that. He doesn't use a paper planner like I do, but he's figured it out on his own. Also, like Jen said, we like to sort of meet as a family, and I think that's really important, especially right now with my 16-year-old who's in high school. I think, and he's taking a lot of classes outside, homeschool classes with other homeschoolers, and he has a lot of assignments and things, and I find that sitting down with him and talking with him about what's coming up, when do you think you should get started on that, and just sort of, I hope it's not nagging, but I hope it's just sort of talking like, this is sort of a good chance to think a little bit about what's coming up next week and what should you be working on. And one thing I've found that's really helped as far as either delegating or getting the whole family sort of on board with what's going on with what you need to get done around the house is we have a big whiteboard on our refrigerator. I know a lot of people do. And on the weekends, I used to keep a clipboard. I still do keep a clipboard where I'd write out our plan for the weekend. And it was that big honey-do list of everything we were going to get done. And I would have it on my clipboard, and no one would look at the clipboard. So I finally said, wait a minute, we have this nice big whiteboard on the refrigerator. Everybody can see it. And I write out all the things. And we sometimes add little initials next to it, and I think it becomes very much a family project. It's not just, this is what I have to do, this is what Dad has to do. This is what needs to be done this weekend, and how can we all help get this accomplished? And it becomes a group project, but there's a little bit of personal responsibility with that too. And everybody can say at that little meeting, well, I have a lot of homework this week. I really need to have time. And I'll say, I have a really important post I'd like to get out on Monday. Could I have a little time to do some photography? And just being on the same board, being aware of what we all need to do is helpful. I think that just sort of is a good way of communicating and respecting where each of us are in that. So anyway, that's a great question though about passing it on, because I don't always think I'm doing as good a job as I should. I'm hoping that they're just sort of osmosis picking up what I'm doing with all of my planning. So
I think they do. I don't think we see it really for that. We don't see the fruit for a while.
I know, until your son's in college and he's balancing a study schedule. He's in exams right now, and
exactly. You think, okay, paycheck. Thank you.
Exactly. Yay.
Yeah, they're modeling for them, and that's probably the best way to teach them, is just by showing them how to do it. It's so easy to just have my plans as my plans, and they're my clipboard, and they're my, whatever. And
right.
you can't do it.
Oh, sure.
Especially when I can see there being a kind of transition too, because when they're really little, or younger anyway, the plans, I might plan to go to the grocery store, and that might excite them or not, but it could change. And so if I promise that we're going somewhere and it doesn't happen, then I have to deal with that too. So I found for quite a while I wasn't telling them any of our plans, except right at the moment, because then if it didn't happen, there was no disappointment.
Right.
But then as they get older, they really kind of need to know, in order to manage their time and their work, and have a clue about what has to happen. And
absolutely, and deal with disappointment too.
Right. I love what Dawn said about the common space, and we have that too. Ours isn't a whiteboard, but it's a huge calendar, and it's in the kitchen, and all of my kids go to it, but especially my big kids, and I think it does offer them that opportunity to exercise some consideration of others, what other people are doing, how can we help out. So I love how Dawn introduced that idea. I think that's probably key. My guess is that if you looked at families with older children, most of them have some sort of common area, however that looks, depends maybe on the family, but a common area where you're going to put your plans, your goals, whatever projects are going on, and at some point there's some kind of meeting where people are chatting together, visiting, usually full of laughs.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple other questions then about when you're talking about big picture and seasons. So, Dawn, you mentioned 6 seasons, and one question is, what are those seasons? Are they like equal chunks of time, or what do they correspond to?
Sure, actually, yeah, they are actually 2 months at a time. So there's January, February is deep winter, and then March, April's early spring, and it just helps me to sort of separate the year out that way, and 2 months at a time is just a manageable, it's still a big chunk, but it's a season, so there's a real feel to January and February, especially here in New England where I live. Our seasons are very distinctive. So that for me is the big picture. There's 6 seasons, 2 months at a time. And that's my big picture, and that's where I do all my brainstorming, and I have my, my binders, and I come up with all these plans that may or may not happen, but they can be carried over for next year. And because that's true, like when you look at, like, say, the liturgical calendar, there are so many. It's a feast every day. There's something going on every day, or something you could tap into that week. Same thing with nature. So you can't do it all. And, that's what the beauty is of life, if we get to have another year. That, for me, I think is why I love the seasons so much, is because they're a gift every year. There's something familiar that's coming back to us, but there's always that newness as well. And it's just, we get to do it again. So I'm always coming up with as many ideas as I can. I get them down in that big picture, and then comes the figuring out, okay, so what this week and what that week, and getting a little more nitty-gritty about it.
All right, and another question. Yours too, Dawn. What are your seasons? Do you have a certain number or a certain chunk of time?
Oh, did you mean me? Did you mean me, Misty?
Yeah, Jen.
I think it must be very similar to Dawn's, although I've never thought of it as 6 distinct chunks. I definitely plan in seasons, and we definitely have an early winter here, and in the South, our seasons are probably not nearly as distinct, but they do manifest themselves in various ways, and so we tend to move by the liturgical seasons and the natural seasons. So I end up planning 2 to 3 months at a time, and typically just considering the natural season first, just because if I'm going to plan on tackling the gardens, tucking the gardens in or mulching or something, then obviously that would sort of march to the rhythm of that season. And then two, for example, we're in Advent now, which is sort of a quiet but joyful time of preparation as we get ready for Christmas, and so that animates some of my plans too. I'm not going to put a lot of crazy things, lots of fun things going on my planner. I'm trying to keep things really quiet, and I'm trying to guard quiet, which is sort of how I steward our time here in exercising hospitality. So those seasons really do help us consider how the plans will look. So as I consider this big chunk of time, which is 2 to 3 months, which is really kind of a big chunk of time, I'm also thinking about how the church is kind of directing us or guiding us to live, and how the natural seasons are giving us some guidance there too. Make this big list, and from there each month I look at the big list and pull some things off of it so that it's not unreasonable and I don't feel like a complete failure at the end of a month when I haven't completed 263 tasks. Maybe we're on a master list, and it's fine with me. It doesn't bother me at all if I slide things from big picture plan to big picture plan, and I could look back at plans and find that a year ago I had the same thing listed and I haven't done it yet, and that's okay. Sometimes life just interrupts.
Oh, sure. That happens all the time.
So it's flexible then, those chunks of times. It's not always a certain.
I think it has to be as a mom. I mean, I don't think you can't be inflexible as a mom. So you kind of learn, your kids teach you that skill, and you fine-tune it when you're planning, and you learn that, this fantastic craft that maybe you wanted to accomplish today didn't fit in with the plan of the virus that visited early this morning.
Yes. We were sick last week, and I had all these plans that were going to happen because I had my Advent planned out, but it doesn't always happen that way,
No.
I think it's good for the kids to see us have that attitude, to say,
yes,
you know what, we put a lot of effort and energy into it because it's worth it. It's worth it to make those plans and come up with those ideas because it's what we're doing for our family and for ourselves. I get so much enjoyment out of it, but I think also showing them that there's always hope, there's the next season, there's the next week, there's the next day, and just modeling a good attitude is important for them also when those things don't happen.
Exactly. We budget our money and so well, but we forget that we should budget our time too. And so what if we have to, move things around in our time budget? It's still worthwhile, like you were saying, Dawn. So it's worthwhile to hang on to for the next year, or the next season even.
I agree. Definitely.
Yeah. Let's see. So one question was, my 6 weeks, do I plan the entire year or only 6 weeks at a time? And so I'm curious if you guys have a similar process. This is the time of year where I'm thinking about 2016 as a whole year. And so I do get a big picture, try to get a big picture of like things to focus on or areas, especially habits that would be the most effective things for me to be doing, like the real places I should be spending some focused energy on. What would be a habit this year that would really help the most? And that's kind of how I've built the habits of like reading my Bible every day or exercising every day, is kind of that big whole year picture, thinking, all right, this is really what I should focus on. And then in the 6 week chunk, kind of evaluating and tweaking that plan every 6 weeks or so, and saying, this was one, I tried reading my Bible at this time of the day and it didn't work. I'm working toward the habit, but, I might need to flex and adjust and figure out how it's going to end up fitting in. And, I love to tweak my plans and change them and like, oh, it didn't work out today. I'm going to totally revamp the entire system. My 6 week chunk of time, I call it an interval, is kind of, no calling, no. Is my chunk of time where I can't totally throw out the plan and start all over from scratch until a break week.
Right. Yeah, it's so great to have a new plan, isn't it? I'm always tempted to just say, okay, new plan. I love to do it. But you know what you were just saying?
It's a lot more fun than working the plan that I have.
Well, sometimes it is. Sometimes coming up with a new plan is a little more fun than just hashing out the old plan. But I was just going to say that when you were saying about revisiting, what I find that I do is I love to plan out the year, but what I try to do is every other month is sit down and look at that next season. So I'll take, like, say, in January, I will look at March and April. I'll look at that next season. So that's when I'm looking at the calendar and seeing, like, okay, I have all these plans. This is what I've envisioned for my early spring for the family. But now I'm actually looking at our calendar and seeing what's come up and what might have changed. And so, you know, definitely checking in and fine-tuning as real time goes along is a good idea.
Yeah. All right, so one more question before we move on to our next point that we were going to talk about, and that is someone's wondering well, we've talked about how often, but where and how do you do that kind of big picture thinking, planning? Do you get away for a little bit on your own? Do you do it just kind of in the midst of daily chaos, or how does that actually happen?
I think I enjoy staying up later than everybody else, just because if you are a mom, then your time is interrupted or redirected, and there's just no way around it. You're always going to have to bend a little bit and be malleable to what's going on around there. And it sort of interrupts the flow if you thought, because I'm famous for thinking, oh, I need to add this to my plans, and then immediately have to go tend to something else, and I forgot about it. So I like to do the sort of big picture where I'm really being reflective and kind of considering the things that we want to hit, the plans that I want to make. I like to do those big kind of plans late at night. So that's probably the time I plan the most, or during a nap time. I like to get away, but we live far out. So it's not always possible. But that would be great. If I were closer in town, I would definitely go to a coffee shop, something like that. So glass of wine late at night, my laptop, books open, and I'm there. So that's probably me, late at night. That's my maneuver. What about you, Dawn?
I'm probably the opposite, actually. I'm in the morning really early with a cup of coffee because my third son gets up ridiculously early. So I was up at 4:45 this morning with a nice big cup of coffee. But I definitely plan a lot, like is where I can find time. I'm always thinking, it's a hobby of mine too. It's something I think probably all three of us, this is something, obviously it's a passion of ours. So it's something that it's always in my head a little bit. And I think that one of the points I wanted to make today is I think it's really important, as best as you can, is to make time to plan. So actually setting aside time as best as you can. And it can't always happen. There are all kinds of things happening in our life and with our families. But that particular weekend I mentioned, so like the third weekend in January, where I now want to sit down and plan out early spring, if it's possible and if it works, and maybe it's not that weekend, maybe it's the weekend before, but I will say to my husband, I would like to have a chunk of time on Saturday afternoon. I would really like to do some planning. I call it my office hours. And I do that every week too for the weekly planning. And because I've found that it's really important to sort of just think and get my resources around me and have my special books and my planner and my files and just give it some real thought. So it's kind of a balance of thinking all the time and making little plans, and then maybe scheduling some time where I can sit down and really just hash it all out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the swishing thing, don't you guys do that in the mornings? Like, I can get so much done swishing in 15 minutes, and so planning is the same way. If I can manage to snatch 15 minutes here, I can swish a lot of things down on the plans and jot a couple of lists and run with that for the day.
Right.
So, yes, exactly.
We're good at that. We're trying to be.
Okay, so let's talk then about making that weekly plan, or kind of that real plot, what's going to happen this week, and kind of how you line that out and figure that out, and then how you put that into some kind of form that's useful to you instead of just kind of vague and rattling around in your head. You know, I think we each have a different kind of way that we put that weekly plan out, you know, write it out or plan it out. But so if you guys would each share about how you do your weekly plan and what kind of things go on it, like everything, meal plans, housekeeping, you know, what does it look like? And if you have it nearby, like I think I see a planner in the background, Jen. You can definitely do show and tell.
Okay, okay. So it might actually help just because I can show you, like in my planner, I don't know if it'll come out really well on the thing. So at the beginning of, if you guys have seen my blog, you've seen the ridiculous number of things that I have to say about the planner that I use. And so this is it. So it's just about this size. And so it's divided monthly, if you can kind of see the tabs here. Mm-hmm. And I'll show you how I keep at the beginning of each month. This is just a piece of paper that, just like a, you know, a pad of paper, and this is my seasonal plan right here. And so the nice thing about this particular planner is that it has these little things that you can you attach with some adhesive to the back of your plan. So I can just put my seasonal plans right in my planner, and I move them from month to month. Oh, so. Wow. Yeah, so I keep this nearby because this is what I'm working off of. This is my big brain dump kind of a list. And then, so that's at the beginning of the month. And as I'm thinking of the month, I jot things down from that big list, and I'll just go to last week, which hopefully you can see some of these. So I've just taken things right off of my list, and I jot them down, and I'm considering, you know, are we going to be out of the house that day? Do we have an errand, something else going on? Does my son have an algebra test, so I need to make myself available during that chunk of time in the afternoon? Those sort of things. So as I'm pulling from my master list, I'm jotting things down daily, and I tend to consider daily and weekly, I guess. So at the beginning of that week, when we have that meeting that I talked about, I'm looking at the list, I'm considering some of the things that I want to do, and I typically pull 1 or 2 projects off the list that I might want to work on, and I'm letting everybody know these are the projects that I want to work on, what is your availability this day or that, kind of getting everybody on the same page. And then on a daily level, that morning cup of coffee, you're sitting down with your planner and you're looking at it and you're considering, okay, we have to do the girls' laundry today. I see that I'm making Chicago-style pan pizza tonight, so I need to pull this out of the freezer. So it's sort of looking at all of that all at once, getting everything together, and then you're off to the day, sort of swishing in various different directions. Mm-hmm. In terms of the menu planning, I do that typically kind of 2 weeks at a time. And that's just a function of where I live, and it's just easier for me to kind of grocery shop in that way. So if you go to market once a week, then you would maybe plan differently there. But so I just consider again, and those meal plans typically reflect our liturgical season. So if we have a big feast in the church year, then I probably want that. I want my menu to say we are celebrating. It's just another extension of hospitality. So that's kind of the weekly plan, working it inwards from that big overarching plan, and you kind of consider, and you're looking at your day and looking at the kind of things that are going on. And so it's just sort of considered effort as you put things down on paper. And they don't always get done, so I don't know. Let me see if this will show up. So let me show you an example of a day where everything didn't get done. Can you guys see it all? So up here, if I check it off, it's got a little red check mark. I finished it, but if I didn't check it off, I just use a little red arrow right next to it, and that lets me know when I get to the end of the week, I got to slide it. And I picked that up from bullet journaling, I think. Mm-hmm. So I just use kind of a modified. I think it's kind of a neat, streamlined way to get things written down so I can see things visually, and that's how I make note of that. I didn't get that done. That's going to slide to next week.
All right. How about you, Dawn, and your weekly plan?
Okay, so I have a thing about planners. I'm always switching around, and I'm always trying to make my own planner because, as you were saying, Misty, like, what do you include in your planning? And I'm always trying to include everything. So I'm always looking for a planner that will allow me to plan for homeschooling and menu planning and seasonal planning and homeschooling. And it's hard. It's hard to find. I'll find a planner and I'll be like, this is exactly what I want. and then it won't work. And it's probably me. I probably just get a little too fussy about things. But so I'm always trying to make my own planner, which, going back to our first topic, one of the things I was going to say is that I think because I'm always trying to make my own planner, I spend a lot of time thinking about what exactly all do we have to plan. And when you really like write it all out, it's crazy. In fact, I'm going to show you real quick because I did this and I didn't show it in the beginning, but I make a mind map. So like I did this on a small piece of paper to begin with, but I did this just for today where I came up with like the general things like my blogging, which is a small thing, but home and family and community and nature, seasons keeping and house cleaning and homeschooling. And then I just kept adding little notes to say, what goes with each of those things. And it's huge. It's really huge. But what I do is I look at this and I think, okay, now how can I fit all of that into a planner? I need it all to be in the planner. So I use my file crate, which I've blogged about before, and once or twice or 1,000 times. And I don't know if this is going to show up now, but
how long have you been doing that, Dawn? Because I know that I found you through the file crate thing, and it was years ago. So how long have you been doing it?
I started using it the first year I started homeschooling my oldest son when he was 5, so he's 20 now, so about, 15 years, which is, that's crazy. But I did it because I wanted every week to have all of his schoolwork in one place. So I made a folder, and I thought, gee, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a folder for every week? And I started using those folders for more aspects of planning. So I would throw my grocery list in there, and I would throw all of the worksheets for the week, and I would throw in seasonal activities and craft ideas. So I always have that part somewhere nearby, and it has a folder for every week, but it also has a folder for that season. So I'm throwing different ideas in there. And then, I've been kind of going back and forth between planners. And I have made my own planner that I've been using this year, and it works pretty well. What it allows me to do, and I don't know if this is going to show up, but I try to do, I have like four pages for a week, and that allows me to do my homeschooling here and the seasonal planning here, which also includes like some of the home things like our menu plan, and this is like some blog ideas and keeping home and crafts and activities. And then the next spread is actually the agenda for the week. So actually like where we have to be and where we're going to go. And what I've done, and I posted about it a couple of times years ago, but I once sat down and I just came up with every single thing, housekeeping, family keeping that I could think of, and wrote it all out, and then gave it a time frame, and then kept, like Jen said, I kept funneling it down until I had it, all right, this has to happen once a week. The best day for this particular chore is a Monday because of our schedule, and I threw it on the planner. So now, like when I plan out my days, I know that Mondays we have trash and recycling, and we're gonna clean the bedrooms that day, and I write that in the planner as well. So weekly planning. I like to have a rhythm to the week so that every day has a feel and has something assigned to it, and as best as possible fit everything into those assigned days.
Now I can unmute.
You gotta be quiet.
Everyone got very thirsty and had to walk through, and the 3-year-old was sad.
Oh.
But I have a mute button, so it's okay. So yeah, I plan weekly also. Kind of take a little time on Saturday to go through and clean up the plans, because during the week I can't always keep things checked up and kept up. But if I take a little bit of time at the end of the week and make sure things are filed or scanned, and go through my email and make sure I'm not missing something important and all those kind of things, just kind of clean up the system. I've heard it referred to as weeding. So you have the system, if you don't use it, it's just going to grow weeds, and you have to take a little bit of extra time to weed the plan.
I like that. That's good.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I do mostly digital planning with a little bit of paper, and keep my weekly plan. I have a clipboard for a couple years. Hopefully a clipboard that had the kind of weekly routine type things that I would check off. You know, maybe I want to change the sheets on Thursdays, but if I put that on Thursday and it didn't happen on Thursday, you know, the list could just grow and it would just bother me too much. But if I put it on a weekly plan and just saw it, I could try to get it to it Thursday. If I had time on Wednesday to do it, I could just mark it off. Or if I did it Friday, I could just mark it off, and it was okay.
Yeah.
But then I do an index card for the day.
Yeah.
So the things that I want to get done that day, you know, I can write the date out on top.
That's okay.
I might toss the conversation your way, Lead.
I'm not even registering it.
Oh, okay. The 7-year-old is trying to make the 3-year-old wash her hands in the bathroom. Oh. So
I'm sort of glad you brought up digital planning, Misty, because I wanted to mention I kind of do a combination of paper and digital. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, but have you ever heard of the Cozy app? It's C-O-Z-I, and I think it's maybe cozi.com. It's free, and when I sit down to do my weekly plans, I have that open on my phone. So you can open it on your laptop, on your browser window, but I usually just keep my phone open. And when I'm planning my menu, I'm entering. It's a shared app essentially. You sign in with an account, and then my husband can go in and sign in, and my older daughter who drives and can run errands for me can sign in. My son can sign in as well, and you can put all kinds of lists on there. You can actually even keep a calendar on there. So I list all my menus on there, all of my grocery lists, and I don't know if your husband wigs out at the drive-thru, but mine definitely does. We pull up with the van full of kids, and you ask him to order burgers for everybody at Sonic, and nothing makes him break into a cold sweat faster. So we keep on the Cozy app a list of, you know, places we might go to frequently, maybe Panera Bread or something like that, and our regular orders there, so he can just look at that, and it's always there waiting for him. But it's also nice because if my daughter Sarah calls and says, "Mom, I'm going to stop by Kroger on the way home. Do you have anything?" I can just say, "Oh, I do actually. Could you just check the Kroger list on the Cozy app?" So it's nice that it's shared in that way, and that's definitely a digital feature that I keep open and make use of when I plan during the week. And that's another way of kind of keeping families connected, particularly families that have kids kind of going in all different directions during the week.
yeah, that's awesome. I use Evernote a lot. So
yeah,
most
I do too,
guys do that, but it's really easy to then share particular notes
right.
with other people, with my husband or with friends. I can say, or my friend, she wrote out all the books she was thinking about for our group, our kids' book club, and so I have that list in Evernote because she sent it to me, that sort of thing. It's really easy to share across.
Right. It's also nice that you can almost keep a digital homemaking book in Evernote now.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a kind of a hard time visualizing how to make Evernote work for me until I started thinking of it as an imaginary shelf that sort of lived above my desk and had just different notebooks on it, and how would I contain information if I could. And it is nice to be able to clip the pictures and the articles for various things and be able to share those. Yeah.
It is. And just email things straight to it also.
Right.
Handy. So yeah, I have, when you download the program, it's just like this big empty blank thing that doesn't really direct you how to use it.
Right.
So I set it up with, so there's stacks of notebooks, so that would be like a binder.
Right.
And then notebooks hold like sheets of paper, and then which would be a note inside those notebooks, so kind of 3 stages. And so each binder, each stack, I have named by vocation, kind of broken things up. You know, I'm homeschooler and personal and home and church, and it's kind of broken up that way.
Yeah, I think that those are great tools for sort of bringing in some of the digital into planning, although I'm sort of admittedly a paper planning gal.
Let's see. So we have some more questions. Let's see. Well, actually, all of these have to do with the day-to-day, which was going to be our next point. So maybe those will be answered as we talk about then taking that plan where you've broken it down, you have it written out, what you're going to do when or what you're going to focus on, and then how does that actually work? How is the plan that you've made helpful to you in the midst of the craziness of daily life? And how do you stay focused or know when you should push through an interruption or let an interruption change your plans? How do you kind of manage that, balance that real life?
Right. I think probably we would all agree if you're going to err, it's going to be on the side of the person that needs you rather than the plan. And obviously there are some exceptions to that. For example, I think it's actually really important for our kids to learn that they cannot interrupt. So if mom is doing something and she's let everyone know, I'm going to take 20 minutes to read for myself here, and you have interruption after interruption, then that may be the time to consider some gentle lessons in not interrupting mom and some cues and some keywords to kind of help them learn those things. So same with living the plan. When you have a child that needs you or there's a particular need around the house, how do you determine that balance? And I'm not sure that you could give a black and white answer to that. It's really on a case-by-case basis. But since our job is really to meet the people and planning is really just an extension of hospitality and serving others, then I think that I would probably say I would always tend to give my attention to the person over the plan. Having said that, I come back to my plan all day long. It lays out right here on my desk. It's open. I check on it. I like to check things off. I feel it makes me feel good. I think that that's a great sense of accomplishment to check something off. Great, I've moved something along that list. So there are definite points in the day where I check in. I think that the morning, early morning, is probably one of them with the cup of coffee before you really get rolling. Lunchtime as you take a break with the kids. Early afternoon, and then probably right before bed. Those are big check-in times for me. I can maybe snatch 15 to 30 minutes here or there, but when you're homeschooling a large group of kids, there's just not a whole lot of free time to be spoken for. So I definitely consider that when I make my plans, and I don't fill the list so long that I'm going to feel like a total failure at the end of a day when there's one little check mark and these huge projects that are weighing on me. So I would say that I'm first of all considerate of the day and realistic about what has to happen when I list those plans there. I don't allow myself to feel badly if I need to slide something to the next day or the next week or even the next month. And I most definitely want to give preference to the people that I'm planning for over the plan itself, with the understanding that there has to be that balance for interruptions and learning to be considerate of others and what other people are doing.
And earlier, I think you called it swishing.
Swishing, yes. Yeah, that's definitely, I think we all do that. Swishing, I think if you walk into a bathroom and it's kind of a mess, you think, oh my goodness,
yep.
Time to swish, and you just grab a washcloth and wipe down the counters. You can put the hair things away, and you can get so much done in 10 minutes. I often refer to my Mondays as Bionic because after the weekend, it's great, and we've had this fantastic time with Dad, and the family's been around, and we've all been kind of loafing and blobbing. But I am a bionic swisher on Monday morning. Give me 2 hours of swishing, and I can move mountains. So, yeah, and those kind of moments tend to not be planned for. Like, I don't write swish at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I just know that if I walk into the girls' room and baby dolls have exploded everywhere, I could probably take 10 minutes and swish them into place or get them to help me model how to move the baby dolls into place and do something like that. So I definitely move in swish moments.
I think having those kind of words and mentality helps us too, in just kind of keeping a positive spin and saying, no, this is my job, because it's so easy to, see the explosion and just get frustrated. But instead to say, okay, now this is what I can take care of this in 5 minutes. It's not that big a deal.
Right.
It's just really a mentality shift.
I agree. It's definitely an attitude, and when you really kind of fall in love with the idea of serving the others in your family, that's an extension of hospitality. That's how you're going to show love to your family. then it's a little bit easier to see those. Although I will admit, interruptions didn't tend to, your fifth interruption in the last 5 minutes, and you're kind of enough already. But
so how about you, Dawn, in keeping a focus on the day or handling interruptions?
Well, I love everything Jen had to say, and first of all, I'd say absolutely, my kids take precedent, and one of my sons is autistic, so his needs are really very much part of our life. So as much as I like to plan, I know that my day is not always going to go the way I want it to do, or it might just, he'll need me more. I also have a 2-year-old now, so between the two of them, I never know exactly how my morning's going to go. But same kind of thing. I use the really early morning to sort of revisit, just like, planning ahead. All right, let me check back in and see, what did I have planned for this day? What had I written in my planner? And having done that ahead of time, there's nothing I hate more than getting up in the morning and having absolutely nothing on my planner and thinking, wait a minute, now what was I going to do today? What was coming up? So my planner is like my anchor, and I just lay it out there in my kitchen, right in the middle of the kitchen. And in the morning, I have my coffee and I check in with it. And the other thing that you guys were just talking about that I like is just the whole getting things done quick. That's one thing, like I tend to overthink things a lot, or I have for a lot of years, and when you get down to it, stuff doesn't really take as long as you think it's going to. So, when I have laundry to do, just boom, just get it down there, get the laundry in, get back upstairs. It's like 10 or 15 minutes. And, I try to bring the kids down with me if I can, but sometimes it's just easier for me to just go down and do it myself and get it going. But I'm definitely checking in with my planner through the day. I find, for me, having it set up right in the kitchen on the island, right there where I can look at it through the day, and having a rhythm to the day as far as having an idea ahead. And again, it goes back to a little bit of planning ahead, having looked at the day and knowing, all right, so in the morning we have a good chunk of time before therapy starts, and then we have a little bit of time before my youngest has his nap. So where can I fit things in? And just being a little more realistic about what exactly I'm going to get accomplished, or what should I start or not start. And the other thing for me, which is now that my 2-year-old is still napping, thankfully, is I find that afternoon time when he's napping, I used to use it for getting like 1,000 things done, and now I sit and I rest for a little bit, and I do the things for myself, whether it's reading, or a lot of times it's working on the blog, or it's just checking in with my planner and saying, where am I? Let me just catch my mental breath here. And then having that rest of the day ahead and seeing, well, how much have we gotten done, and what can be done maybe another day this week. So the days, they very rarely go according to what I've planned, but I think that just having that plan set and knowing what I have down that needs to have a check mark and what things don't need to have a check mark so much is a big help to me. Misty, you mentioned about index cards, and I've used index cards a lot before, and I find them a really neat thing. A lot of times I don't like having them on the counter, and I'll end up moving them, and then I don't use them so much anymore. But that's how I sort of made my housekeeping calendar, is I funneled everything down into a day, and this Monday, these are the things that need to be done. And just having it there and looking at it is helpful. But also it's keeping that mindset of what gets done is great, and what doesn't will get shifted to another day. So just making use of the time that we have, and letting go a little bit of our expectations, I think, too. Just relaxing a bit.
Yeah, and an index card, I like it because it's small. So it reminds me, you can't fit in everything you want to. So
right, exactly.
Small little card. You do not have a full sheet of paper. You have a small little index card.
Exactly, yeah.
For so long, I did, my kind of daily planning in the morning, before the kids are up, fill out my index card, look over everything. And I've recently, in the last few months, switched to an evening planning time. So I plan out the next day, the evening before. And I still have to look at the plan in the morning, to move forward with it. But I find that I make a much more realistic plan in the evening than I did in the morning. Because the morning, I was fresh. I just had a cup of coffee. The house is quiet because the kids aren't up. And I thought, oh, Well, today
possible.
I can do everything today. But at the end of the day, I think, okay, so today I didn't do this, and this right here is the most important thing. I have a better perspective, a more realistic perspective on my priorities at the end of the day. So I've been trying to make my plan in the evening instead of in the morning.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And I don't know if you ladies do this, but do you ever build little reward moments into your plans? I definitely put little, like, I mean, it's understood that there's a glass of wine after post 8 p.m. But there might be like a little, a mini trip out to shopping by myself somewhere along the way. So
yeah,
those are neat things to sort of jot down, and they kind of give me something to look forward to, particularly when you're thinking, oh, it's the 18th load of laundry for the day, and the baby just had an accident, so now there's going to be 19 loads, and so you need to be thinking about the dark chocolate-covered almonds at the end of your day, and sometimes it's nice to have that checkbox right there.
Absolutely.
Or even I've been folding my laundry up in my room. So say, well, when I fold the laundry, I can close the door, and maybe I can listen to my audiobook or a podcast or something.
Exactly.
Make that folding laundry, which I don't really want to do.
Yeah.
Like, well, no, this is actually a quiet moment by myself. It's all in how you look at it.
Exactly.
So we have a couple questions here, but it's 2 o'clock. So I don't know if you guys want to answer a few questions, or we could share the questions and write blog posts later. Do you guys have a few extra minutes to go?
I'm going. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So one question here is, have you ever struggled with putting the list first over the people?
Yes.
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 Absolutely.
Definitely honest answer. And honestly, I think we all kind of struggle with those various things. Those are virtue-building moments, and they're not always easy, and sometimes it's a habitual reaction. Maybe you're used to sort of, you're sitting here and you're kind of working, and you're used to being able to follow a line of thought through to the end. And then you have these wonderful children who come along and interrupt in a variety of ways over through the day, and we get into this habitual behavior of, oh, okay, I'm coming. And so those are kind of helpful moments to sort of think about in the morning as you're considering how you want to work through the day. And I like to give myself little keyword prompts like don't eye roll, or smile and take a breath before you answer, or various little things to kind of help check that behavior, so that maybe I'm kind of working on that habit of reacting and giving myself a moment to consider, okay, this is my child in front of me. Is this a moment for the child to stretch towards virtue, or is this a moment for me to stretch towards virtue?
Oh my gosh, our kids teach us so much. I mean, the patience that you have to show sometimes, and I immediately thought of how very often I will come up with this, this theme for the week and these great activities that we're going to do, and I'll have these crafts planned, and I'll immediately be thinking, this is going to be a great blog post. I can't wait to put these pictures up. This is going to be fantastic. And it doesn't work. Either somebody's grumpy, or somebody, needs a nap, or it won't nap, and, there's definitely a very real, honest reaction of, I wanted to do that craft. I wanted to do that activity. But you know what am I doing this for? I'm not doing it for me, and I mean, I love my blog readers, but I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for my children. So what do they need from me right now? Well, one of them needs to not nap, and one of them needs to feel less grumpy. So, that's always a real learning moment, is just exercising that patience. It's a gift, really, when you think of it. You just get to grow a little bit and breathe a little bit and say, okay, we'll try this another time. So yeah, it's hard, and I love my lists. I'm such a list person, and it can be a real lesson at the end of the day, looking at how very little got done. But I think your intention counts. I think that what you've tried to do definitely counts, and just move forward as best you can.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times we don't consider the supernatural lessons that are in that day. Those interruptions that came along that sort of preempted all of our list making. And at the time, we want to react in that sort of angst. Well, I had these great plans. So if we if we learn, and this is definitely something I'm still learning and working, we learn to control that response and give ourselves a minute to sort of collect ourselves and think about the moment and then re-engage that person that's in front of us. When I look back in the evenings, I always think, okay, I see now where God was putting me during the day. Or I think, oh, I really messed that one up. I've got to get better at being patient and listening in the moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And kind of realizing, too, even while making those plans, that those are the most important things and what we really need to be working on and working towards. It's way more important than whether or not all the laundry got put away.
Yeah.
And so,
Definitely.
yeah, sometimes it, maybe we should be putting other things on our list instead of all the things that we want on our list. I've put, look into kids' eyes and smile at them in the morning on my list.
Yeah. Sit down and listen to what he's saying to you,
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, all right, another question was, how do you deal with other homeschooling mommy friends who find your planning personality intimidating?
Oh. Goodness.
You'd have to just acknowledge that everyone's temperament is different, and so that the way people think and visualize how they're going to get through a period of time, day, week, month, year, how that looks for a person is going to be different, and that's totally fine because God created us each very unique and very differently. So I think that I would probably just acknowledge that I'm very grateful for everyone's different gifts. And I think probably just leave it there, just because I think that I don't want to be intimidating. I would not want to be intimidating. I just enjoy the things that I do and find great joy in them and sharing about them, and would never want them to be intimidating in any way. Dawn, what about you?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that everybody has different strengths, and I remember one time someone saying, you do all these crafts with your kids and you're always setting these things up, but you know what, that's what we do. And this was a mom who was taking her kids out more. That was their thing. They were doing more of the field trips and they were very active, and I thought, well, that's the way you're doing your family, and I'm doing my family like this. So I think everybody just has to respect that we all have different strengths, and this is what I like to do. I would hate to think that I was ever. I think I'm probably the least intimidating person you could meet. I mean, I would hate to think that, but I have had through. I don't, Jen, you probably have too through the years. And Misty, with your blog, occasionally someone will say a comment and they'll feel like, well, gee, how can you do all of this, or how? But you know what? If you're living in my house with me all day long, you're going to see it all. And what I put on my blog is a little tiny picture, and it is the best of what I have to offer for that day. And it's not my whole life. It's the very best parts. It's what I take joy in, like you said, Jen. I have so much joy, and I want to share that. And there are ideas that I think are fun to share. But believe me, I have a lot that's not always showing up on the blog, just like anybody else. So I think everybody just needs to be happy for each other, and the way they're raised, and the way you're doing it with your kids is because that's what matters to you and your family. Mm-hmm. And just
I see a question, Misty. Vanessa Phelps asked. She was just saying it is intimidating to somebody who's just starting out, maybe a young mom, and I can certainly see that. But I would encourage young moms, any mom, regardless of the shoes that you're in, you have to consider where you are first. So it's great to enjoy something like this where we can share together and maybe share some photos and snippets of our lives, and hopefully you find some little idea you can glean and take away from it. But whether you're reading blogs or watching a webinar, reading a book, going to a conference, you always have to glean and take away from that, much like Ruth did in the fields with Boaz. And you can't consider the skills that Dawn brings to the table, her planning, her style of planning, and her methods as the be-all, end-all pinnacle. That's what works fantastic for her. But as you're gleaning ideas, you have to filter those through your family, what God wants of you, and where you are with 5 children under the age of 8, and consider, okay, I can start here. This is a great starting point for me. So I think when folks are really intimidated, it's maybe a great opportunity for that person to take that to prayer and prayerfully brainstorm that one through and ask yourself, why am I intimidated? What did I enjoy about that? What did I like about that? I give myself permission to leave all the rest, and I'm going to take those ideas that brought me joy or that inspired me or gave me hope, and now I'm going to filter those through prayer and see if I can brainstorm those out to put them into place in a practical way in my day, in a way that fits my day and my family.
Those are great points.
And all of you have been planning and honing your processes and practicing them and tweaking them for years and years.
Right.
So
exactly.
At this point, you have something that works well for you, but someone at the beginning of that journey is just getting started figuring out. So, how many iterations have you gone through to find what works?
Right.
And
exactly.
Everyone just has to go through that. So you don't just arrive without having gone through that process and practice.
Exactly.
And I wonder if sometimes, people think, oh, I made this plan and it didn't work, therefore I shouldn't plan. Therefore, the people that are planning, their plans must be working or else they wouldn't be doing it. Some kind of feeling like, am I missing something? Because I feel like planning is a waste of time.
And I think that's why it's such a good idea to share about when it fell through. I try to be really aware of that in my blog, is just, being honest about, yes, I had all these great plans. In fact, I was thinking of doing a follow-up to some of my Advent posts, because we got really sick about a week and a half ago, and we didn't even have to get sick. It could have just been like normal life, and we wouldn't have done half of what we did. But I try to do that sometimes, is follow up with, yeah, I said these 20 things might happen, and maybe 3 of them did. So that's life, and yeah, we've been doing it for a long time. So you just kind of roll with it, and you say, well, what happened was great, and it fit our life and what we needed right then, and we'll just save the rest for another time. But, everyone starts out, this has been 15 years for me, homeschooling, and I was not doing what I'm doing now 15 years ago, and you learn a lot along the way. So, but that's hard. It's hard, I think, to look at other people's plans and compare, but that's a very human thing to do. And Jen, you had a good point about just sort of praying about it and thinking, what can I do in my life, and how can I make plans for my family that fit, not someone else's.
Yep. I think that's good for all of us to remember, especially as we, it's very tempting to compare each other, mine to yours, and just kind of, play that comparison game, which doesn't end well for anybody.
No, it doesn't.
No, it's poison. It's very poisonous. And it's helpful to remember that out of all time and eternity, God chose you to be the mother of those particular children. And the skills and the joy and the weaknesses that you bring to that, all of those play into this. So if He chose you and He doesn't make mistakes, you've just got to run with it.
So what would you say to the mom who feels like she's tried a lot of systems or a lot of planners and feels like nothing works? Is it worth continuing to try, or maybe she feels like she should give up? How do you keep pushing on when you just kind of feel defeated and discouraged?
That's hard.
Yeah, that is a tough one. I think that probably the first thing I would say is stop looking around for just a little bit. And start asking yourself some questions. I love to brainstorm with questions, and this is probably one of the greatest skills my mom taught me from her days in homeschooling, when there weren't this wide variety of homeschool catalogs and websites and various things to go through. You had yourself and your needs, and you wore them out praying, and you brainstormed, and you just asked a bunch of questions. So for the mom who's tried lots of things and can't seem to find something that works, I'd say stop looking around, start praying, and ask yourself, how do you intuitively think? Do you think in stacks? Maybe you're a Post-it note gal. Do you think in big chunks in files? Do you think on paper? Do you impulsively go to your smartphone to enter things? Maybe you prefer a digital format. So that's probably the first area to tackle, is what form can planning take for you that's intuitive, that seems to kind of work with the grain? And from there, it's really just a process of considering the family, your vocation, the time, and how you're going to steward it. That part is kind of the easy part. You're sitting down and considering. It's really the format and how is it going to look for you. What do you think, Dawn?
Yeah, I like what you said about taking a break. I think that's probably the first thing I would say would be to just sort of, if you've been trying all these different things and nothing seems to be working. I mean, I would first like to say that I try all kinds of things all the time and things don't work, and I try something else and it doesn't work, and it's, you know, it's hard to keep going forward with hope. But I would say definitely take a break. Maybe just take a real break from homeschooling even a little bit. Just cut yourself some slack. Just give yourself a breather. Pray about it. Talk with some other people in your life that you might be able. I find, and my husband, planning's not his thing, but I talk to him about it a lot of times, and I sort of bounce things off to him, and he'll have some interesting things to say to me from his experience. So I would say take a break, talk with some people about it, pray about it. Come back to it. Maybe just start real small with just, if you have a little thought, write it down on a Post-it note, like you said, Jen. Just start keeping, don't make it a big deal, but just brainstorm a little bit every day and just, do the best you can and see where it takes you. But that's very hard. It's very hard to be discouraged and to continue going forward with hope. But just taking a break should hopefully, I would hope, help.
Mm-hmm. And too, I think thinking about what is the point of having the plan, because the point of having the plan isn't to make sure everything goes my way.
Yeah.
If you have to have the right reason, kind of reason in mind, or what is the goal of having this plan? What is it going to do for me? It's not going to give me control.
Right.
It's going to help me see what I need to be doing.
Mm.
Exactly. So it's an extension of hospitality.
Yeah, whatever you can just see, so that you can kind of remind yourself in the moment, these are the things on my plate right now.
Mm.
That's really what it's about. It's not about having it together and being impressive or getting control over everyone or everything, because that's just not going to happen. And so having kind of the wrong picture of what the plan's supposed to be doing. That can be kind of a deeper thing, and not you might not be realizing what's underneath the angst about the plan.
Right. I think that's an excellent point. I think because the plans really are for each of us how we serve our families. We're just trying to write all those little loose ends down somewhere so that we can kind of keep them tied into a cohesive whole and keep us all moving kind of in a general forward direction. So if you're stuck and you can't figure out what you should be doing or how you can plan, or this all looks great but it won't work for me, it's all flopped in the past, give yourself permission to be a little bit messy and put some wider margins in your day so that you have some room to kind of plan and be creative. And think of planning as simply a way of exercising hospitality in your family, rather than something that looks perfect and pretty in this beautiful notebook and all tidy and color-coded. This is simply how I exercise hospitality. What will I do to exercise hospitality and serve my family today? Yeah. Here's my list. I'm going to try to get it done, God willing, and if I don't, then we'll slide it.
Yeah, I think it's a good, like I said, we were just sick, and I think that's a good lesson in the sense that plan, I didn't have a plan that week. That went out the window, and it became very much about just serving my family. What does everybody need today? Everybody needs to feel better. Everybody needs to feel tended to and cared for, and we need to do the very bare minimum. And there was no plan. I was barely looking at my list or any of those things, so I just basically paid attention to needs. What does everybody need? And that might even be something to do if someone was burning out on planning or using the right planner or not having the right planner. Just take a break and just sort of pay attention to what the needs are around you. And again, just maybe taking little notes, but just focusing on that and how you're serving your family and yourself.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up and give people something to think about. And I will be sending out a follow-up email with the links that were shared in the chat box and a replay of this so you can watch it again. And I'll send out links too if we end up doing follow-up posts maybe, so something like that. So thank you so much, Jen and Dawn, for joining me. This was a great conversation and very helpful. Thank you.
Such fun. So much fun.
Thank you so much for having me.